All right, Chapter 20, Section 2, The Emergence of Russia. How did Russian territory expand under the Czars? What economic political conditions marked the communist era? How did the end of communist rule lead to changes in Russia? These are some of the important objectives of the chapter. Some terms to think about: Czar, abdicate, Soviet, command economy, glasnost, and perestroika, as I'll go over in a moment. Russia under the Czars. Here's the Russian territory under the Czars. It shows the gradual expansion. As you can see, they often ask you, where did Russia begin? And they have this thing called the Principality of Moscow right here. And you can see this gradual expansion over the years, right? How Russia gets bigger and bigger. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Russia under the Czars. After the Mongols were expelled from Russia, Russia began nearly 3 centuries of growth across northern Eurasia under the Czars. Russian power was challenged in 1812 by the French Emperor Napoleon, but he was forced to make a disastrous retreat. By the beginning of the 20th century, Russia controlled almost all of northern Eurasia. Feudalism and serfdom remained in Russia through the 1800s. After serfdom was abolished in 1861, peasants were forced to pay high prices for what little land they were given, remaining poor and dissatisfied. So that's important, right? Under serfdom, the peasants were forced to work on the land of wealthy property owners through this system, right? And they were controlled almost like slaves. They were even told who they could and could not marry. So you could see how this would create some discontent in them. But to make it worse, they got rid of the serfdom system, and they forced these peasants to pay high prices, and that forced tens of millions of people to remain on the estate and pay prices for what little land they were given, and they didn't like that. So this is sort of the precursor to communism, right? The rise of communism. As a result of the Russian Revolution in 1917, the Tsar was forced to abdicate. That means to give up his power. And the Soviet Union was established. So that's an important milestone in history after World War I, or near the end of World War I, sorry. In 1917, that's when this happened, a Russian Revolution. A communist dictatorship was set up with a command economy. We talked about that since September, what that is. One in which a central authority decides which goods will be produced. I guarantee you they're going to have something on the STAR test about the command economy, so you have to know this concept if you don't see me. Under communism, the standard of living remained poor, and dissenters, that means people who disagree, right, were sent to prisons or forced labor camps, or were executed. Wow, nice choice, right? So you either agreed, or you were very poor, or you were sent to a concentration camp, or you were just simply killed. Farmland was reorganized into state farms and collective farms, but with few incentives for workers, production remained low. So you may ask, what is an incentive? Sometimes you may say, well, more prestige in your job, higher pay, a company car. These are things that people give you in order for you to work harder. And so under the system of collective farming, there was little incentive for people to work harder. So I'm kind of telling you that, but they're just telling you here that it was, they formed. This is what happened under communism, but production didn't. They thought that production would go up, but it didn't, because people didn't want to work harder than their friends and not get more money, right? So they didn't work as hard, so they didn't produce as much. The Soviet policies emphasized the development of heavy industries. The Soviets thought by developing heavy industry like building tractors and tanks and missiles and whatnot, that would stir economic growth. And so that was emphasized. In 1941, Germany invaded, but the Germans were slowly overcome by Russian troops who took Berlin in 1945, excuse me. I was thinking of 6 because I think that's, 6 million Jews by the Nazis, right? But we always, that gets talked about a lot. But the Russians lost, I think the number's 20 million people fighting the Nazis. So, 20 million. They've slowly, that's why it says slowly, pushed the Germans back to Berlin in 1945. So it took them a while, but they did it. After World War II, the Soviet Union competed for power with the United States in a struggle called the Cold War. Okay, you have to know what the Cold War is. It's a war that's not a war, so to speak. It's kind of fought through substitute countries, if you will. But I don't know if they ask you. I don't think I asked you that. Well, yeah. It's not fought directly. We've spent lots of money on weapons to sort of outdo each other from the 1940s to the 1980s through intermediaries like Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. But it was between the Soviet Union and the United States after World War II. They were the only two big superpowers left, right? Because Germany was gone, Japan was gone. The end of communist rule. The economic reorganization. In the late 1980s, Gorbachev instituted the policies of glasnost and openness and perestroika, or economic restructuring, to gradually change from a command system to private ownership. Planning for the future. Russia experienced many challenges in instituting democratic reforms. Economic hardships have made many yearn for the prosperity they see in Western countries, and also miss the security of the communist system. So, finally, communists have attracted considerable support in elections. Okay, so some people miss the old system. Right? Political change. Given new freedoms, many people call for an end to communism and central government domination. Republics began to declare their independence in 1991. And that's what we talked about in Eastern Europe in the chapter 18 and 19. Right? All right, terms to know. Glasnost, you got to know what that means. It means being more open. So when people disagree with you, you don't put them in a concentration camp or kill them. You're more open, and you're more open about what your government's doing, and you're not so secretive. Perestroika is the Russian term for transitioning from a command economy to a market economy. So you're going from being communist to more like the United States. All right, here's the review. Section 2. How did the creation of collective farms affect Soviet agriculture? Motivated farmers to produce immense surpluses. With state support, farms were quickly modernized. With few incentives, farm production remained low. Soviet policies had no impact on agriculture. Question 2. What was the result of glasnost and perestroika? The Soviet economy quickly modernized. People called for an end to communism and central control. The Soviet government became more decentralized. The Soviets used the new economic power to build up their military. What do you think? Here are the answers.